Well, we are here to review the last case study on the list, which is Jupiter in Cancer. Chronologically, the latest talisman that I've made that still produced some quite excellent results. And the changes in my life have been so significant. This is something I would certainly call the Everfull Chalice. There is a particular phrase in the Picatrix, and this is more near the petition. I did end up doing several Jupiter in Cancer petitions, which I will need to also do some videos on, because now those results I think were even more surprising and I think objectively better than the talisman that we're going to talk about today. But there is this phrase inside of it, inside the petition, that talks about that the mage asks Jupiter to grant the blessings and desires that even one cannot articulate, or either because we don't know how to put words to it, or maybe we aren't confident enough to say what it is, or realistically just hard to articulate. And this is certainly a quality I'm finding more often in this talisman than other Jupiter talismans that I've made. And then this Jupiter in Cancer talisman fully completes a trifecta of Jupiter talismans that I've made. So I have also made Jupiter in Sagittarius as well as Jupiter in Pisces talismans. So with this, I have all of the domain of Jupiter. And here are a couple of the Jupiter in Cancer talismans I've made from this particular election, both in amethyst and aquamarine. Now let's take a look when it comes to the materials. So I was very interested in utilizing this talisman to create, of course, good financial circumstances, but also really good circumstances around just being able to enjoy life. So with this placement for Jupiter, I was interested in having Jupiter give the blessings of the enjoyment of life, peace and quality of mind, as well as the ability just to enjoy life to its most natural extent, as well as support one's bodily health. So again, this is why we are leaning on amethyst, which we have used before, is known to repress evil thoughts and confer the knowledge of all things knowable. And since exalted Jupiter is also Jupiter as the most perfect teacher, I thought also this was appropriate. Let's get all of the best knowledge possible. And then beryl, in the form of aquamarine, is said to be a remedy against laziness, against sloth, against shortness of breath, provide health-related benefits. So I thought these would be two excellent stones for rings of Jupiter. And again, we could see these stones referenced as materials in our classical sources, with William Lilly from Christian Astrology referencing tin, amethyst, sapphire, emerald, hyacinth, topaz, crystal, and bezoar, and beryl being listed under Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. These are some beautiful specimens of these stones. And particularly, the incense I chose for this was a mixture of lingam aloes and saffron, as these are, once again, herbs and materials that are very famous for having life-supporting qualities, medicinal qualities, and are highly prized for this power. So really trying to focus on the purest form of the exalted expression by means of the incense that we're using here. And again, mainly, we are using the planetary intelligence seal as found in Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy for Jupiter. This is what it looks like. And the specific request for this talisman was to build enduring wealth, resilient community, knowledge, and peace of mind. Yes, the community aspect was a big part of the request because, Jupiter is in Cancer. I think when we think of Cancer, it's very easy to be thinking of the domicile of the moon being the most, it's very egalitarian in its desires and aims. It wants to feed the world and feeding everybody. And so now we have Jupiter, the great benefic, in this place where it's indiscriminately wanting to love and support and give blessings to everyone equally, all beings equally. So I figured that trying to have a community angle or a community way in which we bestow these blessings from Jupiter are probably going to be most effective. And then for the invocation, I utilize the Orphic hymn to Jupiter as presented here. Let's take a look at the subject first, and we'll go back to the election. So let's see. Chart facts. So a fun thing about the Jupiter talismans, and Jupiter specifically for my chart, is that Jupiter rules benefic houses both sidereally and tropical. So one would think that Jupiter talismans should be quite good for Josh, which in my experience they very much have been. And at this point, I had made at least one of every single kind of talisman, as this was just this past year in which Jupiter was in Cancer, so kind of more at the peak or pinnacle of my talisman making experience. And after going through and then coming out of the Saturn return, thinking I was feeling pretty disconnected from community in general, from the broader astrological community, magical community, as well as really anyone, really any community. So wanting to sort of find my place or find a place anywhere was a big desire for the petition and request of the spirit. I also was very inspired by a 2018, 2019 event called As Above that happened in Portland, where it was a huge international gathering of magically inclined individuals, weirdos, etc., etc. And I made many new friends at that place, and it was a fun mix of individuals who both had these magical, occult, spiritual interests, as well as interests in being very, very active in the world and really applying their magic and applying their gifts. And I was hoping to find a space like that. So let us look at the election that we utilized for this. And this I made during the June 24th Cazimi election. So pros: Jupiter's in exaltation. Cazimi'd with the sun, so it's not combust. We'll get to that later. I particularly do not enjoy or like Cazimi elections very much. So in the cons of some people don't like it, I am some people very much. It's just in every single Cazimi that I've made. So now I've made Jupiter Cazimi, I have made Venus Cazimi, I've made several Mercury Cazimi. It does not seem to go well for me. The effects and the results of the talismans are just frankly not as good. At least not as good for me compared to a non-Cazimi version of the talisman. But I'm not going to get many chances to be making a Cazimi Jupiter in Cancer talisman, and figured, hey, maybe results could be different. Moon is very fast here, which is excellent. And we have a nice benefic on the MC. So even though the moon is cadent, and that should be sort of chopping off a bit of the results of the talisman, I'm not too worried about it, because we have Jupiter on the ascendant, and Picatrix is saying this removes the afflictions of the moon. And a special consideration is moon is in this mutual reception with its lord. So quite excellent, quite very, very interesting. I don't think this retracts any benefits, and probably only adds to the election. So based off of my criteria, this is about +4, +5, or -3 if we're going to have some qualms about either the nature of the moon or disliking an angular Saturn in Aries or an angular north node for any which reason. But then again, I'll say this considerably. The talisman is not just the election. It absolutely is not. Yes, it's the quality of time, but the thing is, if it's just on the basis of quality of time, we're living through these qualities of time all the time. And individually, we're having, a spectrum of experience of results. Also, we're controlling the expression of the talisman also in part by the materials we are using and the place we are making the talisman, as well as our own individualized nature as the mage. This is all playing a role. Picatrix is clear about this. And in practice, it very much seems to be the case. We're not making it out of this life alive in any which way. At least I haven't met anybody who has yet. So if one is thinking about adding and relatively weighing all the positives and negatives together, you really have to consider, what does one really have to gain from the most beneficial aspects of the selection? What does one really have to lose? And I don't know if it was this exact election, but it was some other one. I got into a mini argument with an individual about how they were like, oh, if I had the ability to make a Jupiter in Cancer talisman, and if it was going to allow me to be sitting on my property that I now own with my ideal husband at my ideal house, but then like a car were to like crash through my garden, that isn't what I want. I don't need any more conflict in my life. And it's just very interesting that you could literally have as the promise in front of you of being able to have exactly what you want, but then there's this minor inconvenience. In this narrative, it wasn't like the car was hitting them or that they were dying. I think it's overall a pretty small price to pay. And they really disliked when I said what came to my mind first, which is like, well, is that not just what the Jupiter in Cancer expects of us, is to be able to be given all these blessings and then be able to help others. Per this example, the individual who is crashing into your yard in your beautiful garden probably needs help and needs you to call 911, and maybe you should attempt to rip them out of the car, or at least call the medical authorities. And then I was called a modern astrologer for assuming that classical forms of astrological magic have to do with ethics, or should involve any kinds of discussions or thoughts around ethics or morality, which is quite funny because in this case, I'm glad to be in the same realm of modern astrologers like Thomas Aquinas and Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. So this is how modern I am, apparently. To a certain degree, to have a perspective like that really is neglectful of the roles in which this magic was studied and performed for. Certainly the king or a domicile lord of people or a nation is going to have their own set of religious and spiritual beliefs, especially within the context of which this magic was practiced, and be thinking that this magic plays a role within their greater form of spirituality or how it sits in their cosmology. To think that is to neglect the fact that certain people were killed and or persecuted for knowing this magic, practicing this, or even having these texts around them. So I find it an odd and curious position to assume that classically no one considered any ethical or moral dimension to the magic that we're practicing. If you have a text that talks about the creating talismans in order to either bless or destroy a city, this very much is in the world of ethical consideration. So yes, maybe this Jupiter Cazimi is still obscuring something that should be more outright discussed or talked about. I believe in Lilly's dignity tables, something like Cazimi gives like a +10 or +15 score, I think, to the accidental dignity or something like this. And this, I think, is a huge reason why people are very much a big fan of Cazimi. People like to talk about it. We have like a fun Latinized Arabic word, if my mind is correct, and so we have like some Orientalism inside the terminology, which people always find fun and want to use. But for individuals who are actually making talismans and then, having a real results-oriented version of their practice, maybe I've only heard once that relative to a non-Cazimi placement, someone is actually preferring the Cazimi. And then in that instance, this individual really didn't care at all for any sort of physical material results whatsoever. They were wanting to have a more contemplative experience with the planets and the planetary energies, which is like, your miles may vary. And as someone who can, ad nauseum have a contemplative experience and understanding of the planets and their domains of life without making talismans, I find it a little less of a priority for my own life. But there are great, textual and historical examples of, why Cazimi is incredibly beautiful. There is this discussion. There is this positioning that the Cazimi is destroying the materiality of the planet. It really is allowing for the purest spiritual expression of the gifts and the nature of the planet. Very, very good. Its gifts are no longer constrained by gross materiality, which is, I think, great conceptually, but practically not very useful, or requires someone with the adequate physical resources and ability in order to best use. And for the majority of people that I am seeing and consulting with, all of the baseline physical desires and needs aren't really met in a way where they could be best utilizing the unbridled, raw, spiritual, powerful nature of the Cazimi itself. Of course, ideally, we want to have every permutation of every talisman. That is how it is of their most perfect and specific form. So, of course, this is why I made the Cazimi, and this is why we should all be making the Cazimi. But just like all the stories I tell about all of my first Mercury talismans I made were Mercury Cazimi talismans, And then, because what does Cazimi also do? It also gives us those hidden aspects of the gifts of the planets. So Mercury's hidden aspect is thievery, finding everyone's ID and luxury credit cards all over town when I was working. And I'm not here to be a thief and to be stealing people's identity. If I was, I'm sure I could have made lots of money. But it was not what I'm here for. But comparing that expression of Mercury in Virgo, Cazimi, to the Mercury in Virgo that I had previously discussed on this channel in the case studies, night and day difference. Night and day difference of really material, tangible benefit of Mercury being in the open versus not. So one was expecting maybe some hidden benefits, or really trying to tease out the expression of the Jupiter and Sun Cazimi. One thing I'm remembering as I made this, I listed before the form of the talisman was beryl, and to discuss aquamarine. I also made a ring of gold with emerald. An emerald is a green beryl. And so this was the ring and the talisman that I made. And let's see what ended up happening. So I wanted Jupiter to bring all the exaltation blessings, bring happiness, build community, and grant some sustained prosperity. And I ended up connecting with two really good friends of mine and presenting an idea to them, to Dear Osland and Hot Grub, about wanting to do this kind of community event. And we ended up putting together, in like a period of 4 months, this event which we called North Star Campout. And, in its early ideations, it was just a matter of, wanting to experience astrological magic with other astrologers and magical practitioners out in nature over several days, where we can really sink our teeth into the lived experience of astrological magic. Ideally, do some ritual as well. Maybe have some speakers, but more than just like a hotel conference out in the woods. That would be failing the experience, but having something a little bit more than that. And so we put that together, and we ended up, and we had never really done anything like this before. I've done groups and events and that thing, but we got 66 people from across the United States to travel to us. Some people drove up to 20 hours to come to our event. And this really does merit its own case study. We had some beautiful elections. We picked a date where it had both quite a substantially beneficial tropical and sidereal election. And we kicked the event off with leading with a Jupiter petition from the Picatrix that also doubled as a good election for Jupiter talismans. So my friend Dira, amazing artist, drew probably one of my favorite images of Jupiter from Picatrix, which is the lion-headed man kind of like threatening the multi-headed dragon and taming it. So everyone who attended and wanted to wake up at like 3:30 a.m. with me, we went ahead and we made talismans. I led the Jupiter petition that was there. And ultimately, like half of the attendees said that it was one of the best spiritual experiences they had in their entire lives. And it was a keystone experience in their spirituality and their spiritual path. And then about 20% of those individuals actually ended up moving to the Pacific Northwest in order to be closer to like this net of community. No, we're not like a cult. We're not like living out on a farm. We did do this on a farm property. And one of the individuals did like move to work on the farm, but they do lots of other events. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot. But in terms of fulfilling the need for community, we absolutely did that. We didn't lose money. That was like quite nice. We made like a tiny bit of money. We paid our speakers. Definitely not enough for all the work that we ended up having to do, but it was, it's a labor of love. We also secured a patronage sponsorship from Sphere and Sundry, Caitlin Kopix, the mother of astrological materia, her organization. And so we had an actual materia bar for all of the different kinds of astrological magical materia that they have made, and then an individual to kind of like walk you through. Like, this is how you can use it. This is what it's good for. These are the placements that it could be beneficial for you. If you have these placements in your chart, then these kinds of materials are going to be more beneficial for you than others. So it was really a transformative experience. And we're doing it again. So in terms of being able to have some nice, long-lasting community and being able to place roots and connect with others and really be serving a need that people want and truly were lacking, this very, very much was that, and providing real, authentic, and powerful spiritual fulfillment within the lens of astrology and magic, rooted in traditional astrological magic. We did this. We very much did this. And, Jupiter in Cancer, this placement, and, this image that comes with it was very much one of our guiding lights, guiding patrons, so to speak, spiritual patrons for the event. And we're doing it again this year. So last year was in July. This year it's going to be August 20th. And we're going to be opening up tickets soon, which will be fun. And we'll do a kickoff event prep at the end of the month in Portland as well. But very, very excited. Very, very excited about this and very happy to be seeing it, because it's very much, in my opinion, that, if we're able to be getting some modicum of results from this magic, we got to be doing something that's like bigger than ourselves and like more beneficial than just to ourselves. Not even necessarily because it's like yes, there's an altruistic angle, and I think like a human good angle, but it also must be particularly interesting to the spiritual hierarchies and the planets themselves. If we're going to have a spirit model, if we're going to have a relational model, a relational astrology model to this, one has to really think and try to get into the heads of the spiritual persons and individuals that we're creating, that we are engaging in magic with. What do you think Jupiter in Cancer particularly is motivated to do? Do you think they're particularly motivated in helping someone make a lot of money shorting stocks? Or do you think they're interested in helping someone find long-lasting prosperity through building community? And to the degree that it's a rhetorical question, as astrologers and magicians, we can just look at the chart, look at the placement, understand its nature and its occult virtue, and be able to answer that. I think this particularly wraps it up. I think a fun little piece was that this was the first round of Jupiter in Cancer talismans that I made. And then after I had made my series of the Domain of Exaltation talismans, I made 140 of those. And that really has its own set of experiences. But the original talisman that I made for this emerald and gold ring ended up breaking, which very, very rare does the talisman actually break on me. So ultimately, to me, this really does point again to the Cazimi, whether it's me or whether it's the placement. It's just not the best. Not my favorite. But hope everyone enjoys. If you have any thoughts or questions, happy to answer them. I gotten some people wanting me to talk a little bit more about petitions, so I may do a video on petitions, both how to actually perform them and find them, and as well as a little case study. Because I have 3 or 4 petitions I know particularly that I've done that I have the results measured for as well. So I may go forth and do some videos on petitions as well next. But then I also have a lot more talismans. I could also be doing case studies. But this wraps up the 7 major planetary case studies that I wanted to share. And in a final video to this series, I plan to do a reflections and lessons learned from making all of these talismans coming up.